The sirens cut across the lake like a warning meant for everyone watching. The HOA thought this call would end his project, but it became the beginning of their downfall. They believed power lived in meetings and rules, yet this story promised a twist hidden inside dusty records no one bothered to read. Evan stood beside his excavator as police lights reflected across the water. He had followed every permit, every marker, every legal step. The lake had been silent for decades, locked behind assumptions and fear, until he brought work back to its shoreline. That change unsettled the HOA board, a group used to control, not questions. They never spoke to Evan directly. They sent warnings taped to doors. They posted notices online. Finally, they dialed 911, claiming illegal construction and public land damage. Neighbors gathered with phones ready, waiting to see Evan embarrassed and stopped. The HOA president arrived smiling, already rehearsing victory. She spoke fast, confident, pointing at the machines and the water behind them. The officers listened, then turned to Evan. He handed them a folder without saying a word. Inside were surveys, deeds, and filings older than the neighborhood itself. While the HOA memorized rules, Evan studied history. And hidden in that history was proof that would not only save his project, but strip the HOA of authority they never truly owned. The officers began reading. And the crowd slowly fell silent. The officers stepped away, flipping pages while the HOA president grew restless. She insisted the lake was shared, that everyone had rights, that Evan was breaking community law. Her voice echoed across the water, but no one answered her. Evan watched quietly. Months earlier, he had inherited land he barely understood at first. The paperwork arrived thick and confusing, passed down through generations. While others ignored it, he hired professionals, traced borders, and followed every recorded change. What he discovered changed everything. The lake was never community property. It had been absorbed into HOA language through repetition, not legality. The original owner never sold the water. Only access paths that expired decades ago. The streets around it? Easements. Nothing more. The officers returned with a different tone. They asked the HOA president for proof. She offered bylaws and printed emails. The officer shook his head and pointed at Evan's documents. One held weight. The other did not, neighbors whispered. Phones lowered. The confidence that once fueled the HOA began cracking. Evan's project was not illegal. It was overdue. The HOA president's smile faded when the officer explained that calling emergency services under false claims could carry consequences. Her authority shrank in real time. As police left without stopping the work, Evan climbed back into his excavator. The engine roared to life, but the real damage had already begun. The HOA had just learned that power based on assumption collapses the moment truth is spoken aloud. The next HOA meeting was packed beyond capacity. Residents arrived confused, angry, and demanding answers. For years, they had been told the lake belonged to everyone. Now they were hearing something very different. The board tried to regain control. They accused Evan of manipulation, of finding loopholes, of taking advantage of technicalities. But words sounded weak without proof. When Evan attended the meeting, he brought maps large enough for everyone to see. He laid them across the table, calmly explaining boundaries, dates, and transfers. Each question was answered before it could grow sharp. The room shifted from tension to realization. The HOA had been collecting fees for maintenance they never legally owned. They enforced rules over land that was never theirs. That truth traveled fast. Residents began questioning other rules, other fines, other assumptions. The board panicked. They sent cease and desist letters. Evan responded through attorneys. They filed complaints. He filed facts. Every attempt to stop him only uncovered more mistakes from the past. Then came the city inspection. Officials reviewed access roads, drainage plans, and legal ownership. What they found didn't just validate Evan, it exposed years of improper management. The city placed restrictions on HOA-controlled areas pending review. Suddenly, the board that once ruled everything could approve nothing. Evan's Lake project continued. Untouched. And as the sun reflected off newly cleared water, the neighborhood realized this wasn't just about land anymore. It was about who had been lying for years. Pressure spread through the neighborhood like a slow crack in ice. The HOA board stopped answering emails. Meetings were postponed. Notices disappeared from doors. What once felt permanent now felt fragile. Evan never celebrated. He focused on work. Crews shaped the shoreline carefully, restoring paths that hadn't existed in decades. Families watched from a distance, unsure whether to be angry or grateful. The lake looked alive again, not controlled, not hidden. Then the lawsuits began. The HOA filed claims to reassert authority. Evan's legal team responded with a single request: a full title search of every street surrounding the lake. The board resisted, knowing what might surface. The court ordered it anyway. What the search revealed stunned everyone. The HOA didn't just lack control over the lake. Most of the roads they enforced parking rules on were privately owned through layered easements. The board had mistaken permission for ownership. Residents received letters explaining the findings. Some felt betrayed. Others felt relieved. Years of fines suddenly looked questionable. The city stepped in again, freezing HOA enforcement until matters were resolved. Without power to fine or threaten, the board collapsed under its own silence. One by one, members resigned. The president vanished from public view. Evan didn't replace them. He didn't need to. The truth had already done the work for him. And the neighborhood would never look at authority the same way again. Spring arrived with open gates and quiet change. Evan placed simple signs near the lake, not claiming control, but explaining history. People stopped to read. Conversations replaced arguments. Children walked paths once forbidden. A mediation was scheduled, not to stop Evan, but to resolve the damage done by years of false authority. The HOA's lawyers spoke less. Evan spoke carefully. Documents spoke louder than both. The settlement stripped the HOA of jurisdiction over all disputed land. Fees collected improperly were refunded. Future authority was reduced to maintenance only. Under city oversight, residents voted to restructure the association entirely. New leadership was chosen with transparency as its first rule. The lake was recognized as private land with negotiated public access, something never offered before. Evan didn't gain enemies. He gained unexpected allies. Neighbors thanked him quietly. Some apologized. Others simply nodded with understanding. The excavator finished its work and left. What remained was water reflecting open sky, no longer guarded by fear. Power didn't change hands that day. It dissolved. And in its place stood something rare in communities like this: truth, recorded and respected. Evan walked the shoreline alone that evening, knowing the fight wasn't about winning. It was about ending a lie that had lived too comfortably for too long. Months later, the story spread beyond the neighborhood. City planners referenced the case. Property owners asked new questions. HOAs grew cautious. A single title search had done what protests never could. Evan declined interviews. He didn't want attention. But the message traveled anyway: rules mean nothing without lawful ground beneath them. The former HOA president resurfaced once, issuing a statement blaming confusion in past leadership. No one responded. Her words no longer carried weight. The lake hosted a small community gathering, the first without permission slips or warnings. People laughed where meetings once echoed. It felt ordinary, which was the most powerful change of all. Evan stood near the water, remembering the sirens, the accusations, the confidence of people who never checked facts. He felt no anger now. Only clarity. Ownership had never been about control. It was about responsibility. And responsibility begins with knowing what is truly yours to govern. As the sun lowered, reflections rippled across the lake. Nothing dramatic happened. No speeches. No applause. Just quiet proof that truth doesn't need noise to win. What began with a 911 call ended with a rewritten understanding of power. And every person there knew they had witnessed something rare: a system corrected not by force, but by record, patience, and resolve. Years later, the lake remained unchanged, protected not by rules, but by respect. The Reformed Association functioned lightly, carefully, always documented. No one assumed authority again without proof. Evan kept the land, but shared access remained. It worked because it was honest. The neighborhood became a case study in law schools, a quiet warning wrapped in civics lessons: people still remembered the sirens. But they remembered the silence afterward more. That moment when truth replaced fear, no one called the police over property again. No one enforced rules they didn't understand. Evan never framed the court order. He didn't need to. The lake itself was reminder enough. Sometimes newcomers asked why things were different here. Residents would smile and say, because someone checked the records. And that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.